Welcome back. Before I dive into teaching you lots of concepts about data science, I thought I'd show you a little demo about the kinds of things you can do with the techniques we teach you in this course. This demo is based on a book called Little Women. If you've never read it before, it's a coming-of-age story about 4 young sisters and how they grow up to become adults. It's a delightful, delightful book. It's available for free online if you get inspired by this video and decide you want to read it. And we're going to be loading into the computer and using that to drive a data set that we can do some analysis with. So let me show you what that looks like when we load it into the computer. Looks like this. And don't get too intimidated by what you see. There's a lot on the screen, but I don't want you to get overwhelmed by it or caught up too much in the details. Let me just talk you through it. We're going to be teaching you how to do programming in a language called Python, a programming language called Python. And the particular way we're going to have you do programming is you're going to be doing it through your web browser. So you're going to go open a web browser and you're going to get to a web page where you can enter in your Python code, and the web page will look something like this. You'll have access to the very same computing environment that I'm using here. Okay, so each one of these cells has a place you can type into. That's where you type your Python code, and then it shows you the results of your typing. Now, I've already put some code here at the top that sets up the computing environment and tells the computer that we want to get it set up to do some data science. You should ignore all that. Don't worry about what you see there. Yeah, it's just some boilerplate that you'll copy paste in. And now I'm going to start using some Python to load the book into the computer and split it apart by chapters. So in this demo, don't worry too much about the code you see or what the code means. We'll teach you the code throughout the course. I wouldn't expect you to know any of this yet, but it's just for you to get a feeling of the kind of analysis that you'll be able to do when you've learned these techniques and you've learned the programming skills. So the first thing we do is we download the text of the book. The book's freely available online. It's been scanned and available for download. So we load that and we ask the computer to read the text of the book into memory and split it apart by chapter. And then we're going to create a table. We're going to create a table with 1 row per chapter. And we get something that looks like this. In a lot of the work we're doing here, it's going to be very helpful to organize our data in a tabular format. It helps us keep the data organized. In this case, you can see we have a table that has just 1 column, and it has a bunch of rows. Each row corresponds to the text of a chapter. Well, there's actually 47 chapters in this textbook, so you can see the first 10 of them here. For instance, if you look at the first row of the table here, highlighted in blue, it starts out, says, "Christmas won't be Christmas without presents." Famous opening lines of the book. And what's going on in the first chapter is the 4 sisters it's about to be Christmas, and they're going to have Christmas without their father, and they're poor, they don't have much money, and they're wondering how are they going to have Christmas when they can't afford to buy presents. Okay, so we've loaded the text of the book into the computer, and now we can start to do stuff with it. Computers are really good for repetitive tasks, for boring tasks that you do over and over again. For instance, one thing they can do really well is count stuff. So let's count some stuff. How about we count the number of times the word Christmas appears in each chapter? We can do that. We can ask the computer to do that for us. Type some code in. We run the code, and we get here. This is, in blue, is the code that I typed in, and then below it, you can see the result of what the computer got when it did the counting. It counted, and it found for us the first chapter of the book mentions the word Christmas 8 times. The second chapter mentions the word Christmas 9 times, and so on. So you can see the first chapter mentions the word a lot, 8 times. No surprise. The first chapter's all about Christmas. They're getting ready for Christmas. They're anticipating Christmas. They're excited about the holiday coming up. They're figuring out how they can come up with some presents for each other. And then the second chapter, Christmas happens. Still mention Christmas a lot. And then the third chapter, well, Christmas is past and Christmas doesn't get mentioned much. Then so it goes for the next few chapters. Christmas doesn't get mentioned much or at all for a lot of chapters until you get somewhere around, chapter 15 or so. And you can see somewhere around chapter 15, the word Christmas is mentioned 8 times now. Well, guess what? By that point, it's the next year, and they're coming up to the next Christmas. Okay? So by looking at these numbers, you can start to get a little bit of a sense of the structure of the book and the ebb and flow of time in the book and the organization of the chapters. All right, let's do something more interesting. What else can we count? Another thing we can count is we can look at how many times the name of each of the sisters appears. Okay, so for instance, we could count the number of times that Jo appears. Jo is one of the characters. She's one of the sisters. Woo, that's a lot. She appears in the book many times. We could do the same for the other characters, for the other sisters, for Meg and Amy and Beth and so on. Let's put all that data into a table so we can keep it organized. So I'm typing in some code here to create a table. And I'm going to have a column for Jo, and in that column, we'll have the counts of how many times the word Jo appears in each chapter. And then let's do the same thing for Meg, who's another of the sisters. And let's do the same thing for Amy. And let's do the same thing for Beth. And let's do the same thing for Lori. And we ask the computer to do those counts and put it for us in a table. So here we get a table. And this is a little bit of a bigger, more complicated table. You can see there's one column for each of the persons in the book, and each row corresponds to a chapter. The first row is the first chapter. You can see that Jo is mentioned 44 times in the first chapter and 21 times in the second chapter, and so on. And if you just look at this data, you can start to get a sense for how important some of the characters are. For instance, you can see that Jo seems to be mentioned an awful lot. And sure enough, she's maybe the primary character. A lot of readers find her their favorite character. She's charming. You can see each of the other sisters is mentioned a lot throughout the book. What about Lori? Well, Lori isn't a she. Lori's a he. Lori isn't one of the sisters. Lori is the next door neighbor. And so in the first 2 chapters, Lori isn't mentioned at all. Lori doesn't come on the scene until chapter 3 when the sisters meet the boy next door. That's Lori. And you can see then Lori starts to be mentioned more as he becomes more and more part of the story. All right, so this is the first step of loading the data into the computer and then putting it in an organized fashion. Okay, so this is what we're going to be doing when we work with a data set. First, we get into the computer and we create a table with the data so we can keep it nice and tidy. Now, as you can see, there's an awful lot of numbers here. It's kind of hard to make sense of all those numbers. It's easy to get overwhelmed with all the numbers that are there. So in the next video, I'm going to show you how to start making some visualizations so you can get a feeling for what the numbers are. This is just the first step. See you in the next video.